Let's start with the feeling I see all the time with my clients. It's that feeling of being professionally, well, stuck. You know you're putting in the work, you're trying your best, but something just isn't clicking. In this explainer, we're going to get to the bottom of that feeling by looking at 3 really common cognitive traps that might be holding you back.
I mean, really think about that for a second. Do you ever feel like you're trapped behind these invisible bars at work? I had a client not too long ago who was just brilliant. He was about to give a huge presentation and he knew his stuff cold. But the moment he got up there to speak, his voice started to shake. He kind of rushed through it. And afterwards, his manager said to him, you just seemed really unconfident. That feedback completely crushed him because inside, he didn't feel unconfident at all. He felt prepared. So, what was really happening there?
If that story sounds even a little bit familiar, I need you to hear this loud and clear. The problem isn't some deep flaw in you. It's a pattern. It's an automatic script that's been running in your brain for years, basically as a shortcut. And today, our job is to finally make that pattern visible. Now, in clinical terms, we call these things cognitive biases. But honestly, I think a better way to think about it is like an invisible prison. Your brain, trying to be helpful and efficient, builds these walls around you. And these walls actually distort your reality. They change how you act, which in turn changes how other people see you. And here's the key, you can't break out of a prison if you don't even know you're in one. So just seeing the bars, that's the very first step to getting free. So let's dive in. Let's really examine the 3 most common bars of this invisible prison. These are the traps that I see holding back smart, capable professionals more than any others. So, trap number 1 is called the spotlight effect. This is that gut feeling, that deep down belief that you are the center of everyone's universe, that there's this huge, unforgiving spotlight following you around, highlighting every single mistake you could possibly make. And look, this isn't just a feeling. We've got hard data on this. This chart shows a really famous study from Cornell. They had students wear a kind of embarrassing t-shirt into a room of their friends. Now, the students wearing the shirt, they thought almost half the room, 46%, noticed it. But in reality, only 23% did. That huge space between 46% and 23%, that gap is where all the anxiety comes from. It's proof that we are terrible at judging how much attention people are actually paying to us. And this is where the real problem lies. Inside, you feel anxious, you're overthinking everything, but because that spotlight makes you hold back your ideas or avoid making eye contact in a meeting, externally, people don't see that. They don't read it as you being thoughtful. They misinterpret it as you being cold or unconfident or sometimes even arrogant. That's the perception gap, and it's all driven by what we call an egocentric bias. Your brain just naturally assumes everyone can see what you're feeling on the inside. All right, let's look at our next pattern because you'll see how these things start to connect. This one is the reciprocity trap. And it's so sneaky because it feels like a good thing, right? It's that natural instinct to be helpful, to be liked, to give and take. But in really high-pressure environments, that instinct can totally backfire. And here's the core truth you have to understand. People don't respect pure effort. They respect boundaries. When you're always the one saying yes, when you're always apologizing, when you're available 24/7, you're accidentally sending a message that your time, your energy, that it's not all that valuable. The clinical term for this is reactive devaluation. It sounds complicated, but it's simple. Our brains are just wired to value things that are scarce. When something is always available, we just subconsciously value it less. I had a client who was so proud that he'd answer every single email within 5 minutes. He thought it made him look reliable. But instead, his team started taking longer and longer to get back to him. His instant availability had actually made his input seem less urgent and less important. And all of this leads us to our 3rd and final trap, the one that kind of locks everything else in place, the consistency bias. This is your brain's powerful, almost self-sabotaging need to keep your self-image exactly the same. Your brain hates being inconsistent, so it will fight any new behaviors that challenge who you've been in the past. So let's say your history is, I'm the quiet one, I'm always anxious in meetings. Well, your brain will do everything it can to make you stick to that story. It'll whisper things like, don't speak up, that's not you, or they'll think you're faking it. But here is a rock-solid neuroscientific truth. You cannot confuse your history with your identity. Your identity follows your actions, not the other way around. You become a confident person by acting with confidence first. So what's going on in the brain here? It's a thing called cognitive dissonance. Basically, the brain feels this really uncomfortable static when it tries to hold 2 opposite ideas at the same time. Like, I am a shy person, and I just shared a great idea in that meeting. To get rid of that uncomfortable feeling, the easiest thing for your brain to do is just sabotage the new behavior so you can go back to that old, comfortable identity.
Now, and this is maybe the most crucial part, these three traps don't just exist on their own. They're all connected. They actually reinforce each other, creating this powerful, self-feeding loop of anxiety.
Let's just walk through the cycle. So first, the spotlight effect makes you hold back and play small. But that makes you feel invisible, right? So then the reciprocity trap gets triggered. You start overgiving and saying yes to everything to feel valued. But of course, that just leads to you feeling burnt out and taken for granted, so you pull back. And that's when the consistency bias comes in and says, see, this is just who you are, the quiet one. And boom, the loop starts all over again. But here's the good news. There is absolutely an exit from this loop. Now that we've figured out the patterns, we can actually talk about the treatment. So let's open up our therapeutic toolkit and get into the practical, evidence-based ways to break down each one of these traps. Okay, here are your 3 core techniques. To shut down the spotlight effect, we're going to use something called the 10-second camera test. To fix the reciprocity trap, we're going to practice what I call unbalanced generosity plus 1 boundary. And to beat the consistency bias, we're going to use the 1% identity shift. So let's break each of those down. A huge piece of fixing the reciprocity trap is just learning how to set boundaries. I know, it can feel super awkward at first, so having a few pre-planned scripts can be a game changer. You can see some examples here. Simple, totally professional things like, I need some time to think on this. That buys you time. Or, my focus is on Project X right now, which clearly states your priorities without you having to over-explain or apologize. All right, to make all this real, we are going to put it into a very simple 7-day action plan. I want you to think of this like a clinical reset. It's just a short, focused week where we practice interrupting the old habits to start building new ones. So for days 1 and 2, your only job is to notice when you're feeling that spotlight effect. When it happens, use the 10-second camera test. You just pause and imagine there's no camera and nobody's recording you, and then you just act. Then on days 3 and 4, we switch our focus to the reciprocity trap. Just notice when you're about to say yes out of guilt and your only goal is to set 1 tiny boundary. And finally, days 5 through 7, we lean into that consistency bias. Your job is to do one small, 1% action that your old self wouldn't do. So what does a 1% action even look like? It is so small. It's almost nothing. It could be deciding to sit in the front row in a meeting. It could be asking just one follow-up question instead of just nodding, or making one tiny decision without asking 5 other people what they think first. Each one of those little actions is like a vote for your new identity. It sends a message to your brain that says, oh, I guess this is who I am now. I really want to leave you with this idea. We tend to think of our personality as this fixed thing that we're just stuck with. It's not. Your personality is trained every single day by all of your automatic habits and patterns. And the good news is, anything that was trained can be retrained. And that whole process doesn't start with some giant, scary change. It starts with simple awareness. So as we wrap up, I want you to think about this. Which one of those traps really hit home for you? Was it the spotlight effect, the reciprocity trap, or the consistency bias? Just being able to name it, that is the first and the most powerful step you can take. It's how you make the invisible prison visible. And from there, change isn't just possible, it's pretty much inevitable.